Children learn from the environments that they spend their time in. For young children, the two key main environments they spend their time in are the home and the early childhood settings. Early childhood intervention, if it's to be effective, needs to reach both of those settings. And we've already considered the kinds of support that's needed by families. So there is the question of how do we support the early childhood settings. There are resources that are currently available, provided through state and the Commonwealth, that provide this, but these are not nearly enough to ensure that all early childhood settings are able to adapt what they provide to enable young children with disabilities to participate fully and to provide learning environments for those children that's going to continue to promote their development.
We felt it really important that she have a 10 3-year-old kinder, as my older daughter and son had done, but knew that there was no way that she could go there without support. For the fact that she was, a 3 or 4-year-old child who'd only just started to walk, only had a few words, was in a nappy, to throw that child into a kindergarten environment was harsh without support in my book. And so although we couldn't really afford it, we self-funded an assistant for the 3-year-old group. We managed to raise over $2,500, which was just fabulous, and that covered the wage for the rest of the year. But without those efforts and without me being able to sort of, enable that too, it wouldn't have happened. And it seems to be constantly the parents are bearing the brunt and the burden of trying to supplement where the funding is lacking. It's not just in kindergarten, it's in early intervention as well, where, we faced a constant battle of having to raise about 40% of the funds to run that early intervention service. Otherwise, the doors would be closed and the children would have to go elsewhere. So there was that constant burden of fundraising. And when you're in crisis and dealing with a child with a disability, you don't need to be finding money at the same time and dealing with those things. So,
unfortunately, we weren't able to access any funding at all because she didn't come under any of the criteria that KISS laid out. So that was extremely disappointing that was the case. Basically I think it's really blatant discrimination really, because here is a child who already is disadvantaged within a mainstream community because she has an intellectual delay which comes with behavioural issues as well. And so not being able to receive any extra funding means that just more barriers are being built up for her, and that over the time of that experience things just became more and more difficult. She just was a lot more unhappy and she became a lot more frustrated until it did get to the point where it was breaking point and her behaviour was quite out of control. The teachers were totally at a loss to know what to do.
The situation had to be so bad for you to get the funding, and it shouldn't be like that. It should be, if experienced teachers are applying for funding, then that's a genuine application, and it shouldn't be about just how bad it's gotten and what she is doing that's really negative. It should just be to give her the best and to give her the best opportunities to progress, working on and especially in a Montessori environment when we see the first 6 years as being so vitally important. But for any little child, those first years are so important. And like I know with children with special needs, you do all that hard work in the with early intervention, and then they come into a preschool situation, and the teachers are doing the best they can. But how much more would they be able to do if they could get more help? From our experiences in 2009, in the second year that Sophia was here, I think we would have benefited from having an assistant with us and her right from the beginning, right from when she first started with us. And that was, again, purely just because Sophia learns in a different way. She needs more time with the teacher or the director or the facilitator. And when we have 24 children in the group, we're not able to spend as much time as we would have liked to. Had we, if we'd had an assistant in that first year, we could have spent more time with Sophia.
It was great that we did have early intervention who could come out and visit us. But because of the limited resources, they could really only get there, every 3 weeks for one session, and she's there 12 hours a week. And so it's just not enough. So she needed more support so that she could be fully included and participate in the program. And also I think the kindergarten teachers actually need to be supported as well. So they need time just one-on-one.
It would have been nice while Sophia was with us if we could have had the assistance of the occupational therapist and the speech therapist every week. The feedback that they gave us and the ideas and the strategies were wonderful, but sometimes the time that elapsed between their visits was sort of a bit too long, and we were really, it would have been great to have had those positive strategies and input every week. It would have been I think, more fruitful for us. But they were wonderful. The staff from Uncle Bob's were wonderful.
And then finally, when it did become Breaking Point, we did get the funding, but we only got it therefore for one semester out of those 2 years. And you could see that once she did actually have it, things did start to shift and they started to change, and so, when she went to do something, she's sort of fond of often, cuddling children, but she'll get them and so tight that they're at a headlock and then they'll be down on the ground. But, they could anticipate when that would happen, and so having that extra pair of hands there meant that they could, stop that from happening, and then so that behaviour wouldn't escalate, and therefore, her peers could start to trust in her again, because they were terrified. They'd see her coming and they'd grab their work because they thought, she'd pull it off the table, or she'd climb onto the table or pour something on it. But this way they could start to build up some trust again. But it's tragic because that only happened at the very end of her experience. And working with a lot of families, and interestingly, in the support group that I run, we've been talking about inclusion lately and having debates about it. And even those families who really believe in inclusion and philosophically think this is a great idea, and we want our children to be in a mainstream environment, they're not. I think there's one out of, and I would have contact with up to 30 families a week who is sending their child to a mainstream environment, whether that be kindergarten or be primary school, because they just don't believe that the funding there is enough to be able to support their children.
From my experiences with Sophia and applying for an assistant, I sort of realised that the inclusive education that everybody speaks about is largely just something to be enthusiastic about and to talk about. It's not, when you actually get down to it, the actual real everyday use of it and application of inclusive education, there's just not the support there.
So what we need at this point is an increase in those resources, an increase in the number of people, of trained people able to support early childhood settings, increasing the amount of time, increasing the amount of resource strategies that are going to help early childhood settings provided. We're talking about both childcare and kindergarten settings. We're talking about services that are able to work directly with the staff in those settings to mentor them, to model appropriate programs, to understand what their needs are and what they might need to do to be able to adapt to the children. If we can do that, it means that we've got another large slab of the child's life which is able to promote their development, and we will then be getting better outcomes. Combine that with the kind of support that families can provide, and we've got a powerful set of resources and experiences that will ensure that these young kids get off to a flying start in life.
Children with developmental delays and disability need the same opportunities to actively participate and benefit from universal early childhood programs. Currently, only 1% of the kindergarten population has access to inclusion support. Families need quality programs to ensure their children are actively engaged and can achieve educational outcomes.